one big thing that a compiler really likes to do is check to see if the brackets in your code are balanced. And that basically just means that it likes to make sure each opening bracket has a closing bracket. And so this code over here is balanced because each opening bracket has a matching closing bracket, and there aren't any extra opening or closing brackets that don't have a pair. And so let's think about how we would actually write a program that does this. And we could use an array, but that might be kind of difficult because we would be putting the opening brackets into the array. And then when we found a closing bracket, we would have to search the array for the matching opening one, and it would be kind of hard to make the program know which one is actually the matching one. And so this matching brackets problem is an example of a situation where a stack would be very helpful. So here we have an example of kind of how we would use a stack to make sure the brackets are balanced. And so basically the way it would work is that every time there was an opening bracket, we would push that onto the stack. And then every time there was a closing bracket, we would push an opening bracket off the stack, if that makes sense. So for this example right here, where as you can clearly see the brackets are balanced. So the first thing that we would see is an opening bracket. So that would be pushed onto the stack. And then we see another opening bracket. So that would also be pushed onto the stack. So now we have two right here. And then we see a closing bracket. So one would be popped off the stack, so we would just get this, and then there would be another closing bracket. So this would be pushed off the stack, and now we just have an empty stack. And so the stack is empty, meaning that the brackets are balanced, since there was an equal number of pushes and pops. So here are some examples of how it would look at unbalanced brackets. So right here, right, there's an opening bracket, so that would be pushed onto the stack. Then there's another opening bracket, so now we have two open brackets pushed onto the stack. And then we have a closing bracket, so one of the opening brackets would be pushed off the stack, and now there are no more brackets, but as you can see, our stack isn't empty, there's still an open bracket. And this would tell our program that the stack is not balanced. As you can see right here, these brackets are also unbalanced. So there's an opening bracket, right? So that would be pushed onto the stack. And then there's a closing bracket. So this opening bracket would be pushed off the stack and we get an empty stack, but there's still one more closing bracket. The program still wants to pop something off of the stack, but there's nothing there to pop. So that would tell our program that this program is not balanced because there's not an equal number of pushes and pops. But this brings us to the problem of mismatching brackets. So as you can see here, there's an equal number of opening and closing brackets, but the brackets are mismatched. So technically, it would not be balanced still since it's mismatched brackets. But we want to think about how our program could deal with this and how it could figure out if the brackets match or not. So here let's write some different methods to help check and see if brackets are balanced. So let's see how we can implement this program, and it looks like we have a collection of methods right here that are going to help us out. So first we have the method open bracket, which returns true if the character C is an open bracket, and then it returns false if C is not an open bracket. And then we have the same thing, close bracket, which returns true if C is a closed bracket, and it returns false if C is not a closed bracket. And between these two, we'll be able to just find out if something's a bracket or if it's just something else in the code as well. And then we have matching bracket. And matching bracket is gonna return the closing bracket that matches the input open bracket. So if C is a parentheses, it's gonna return the closing parentheses. If C is a curly bracket, it's gonna return the closed curly bracket. And yeah, you get the idea. So it just returns the closing bracket that matches the opening bracket that's input into the method character C. So now let's write some code that incorporates different methods to check to see if the brackets are balanced. But before we do that, let's just think about what we want to write. It's always best to outline your idea first when you're writing code in the same way that you would if you were outlining a story or something, because it lets you really think it through, and also to be efficient, as concise as possible when you're actually writing your lines of code. And so let's think first pretty basically. We want our code to go through every character in the string. So while there are still more characters to read, we want it to get the next character in the string, and then we want to check to see if it's an open bracket or a closed bracket. And if it's an open bracket, then we want to push it onto the top of the stack. And if it's a closed bracket, we want to pop a character off the top of the stack, and we want to check to see if it matches the bracket. But notice how this still, it'll keep going even if we've already seen that there's something that's not balanced. It'll still keep going even if we already know that the brackets aren't balanced. So let's try to fix that. And so to fix that, first we want to start by declaring that the string is balanced. And then we want the while loop to keep going if balanced still equals true. So if balanced changes to false, then this while loop is going to quit. And we want to think about where are the instances where we could find out that the stack is not balanced. And so that would be after checking to see if there's a closed bracket. So first, we would want to check to see if the stack is empty, because if the stack is empty, but there's still a closed bracket, then it's not balanced. So we would change balance to not balanced. And then also, if the open bracket that we're popping off does not match the closed bracket, then it's also not balanced. And then after the while loop has kept going all the way through, if the stack is still not empty, then it's also not balanced. We want our stack to be empty at the end. We want the same amount of pushes and pops. So if there's more pushes or more pops, then clearly the brackets are imbalanced. And so here's the code that we could write to check to see if the brackets are balanced. And this is using all the methods that we saw earlier: open bracket, matching bracket, closed bracket. And then also, as we go through this, I kind of want you to notice how all the similarities between the pseudocode that we just saw and this code. So as you can see, right, we're first just making a new stack, and then we're setting balance to true, just like in the pseudocode. And then while there's still more characters to read and the string is balanced, right, just like that right there, then we're gonna grab the next character in the string. Then we're gonna check to see if the character is an open bracket, right, just like in the pseudocode. And if it is, we're gonna push the new character onto the stack. And if it's not, then we're gonna check to see if it's a closed bracket, right, just like the pseudocode. And if it is, then we're gonna check to see, is the stack empty? And if it is, then we're gonna change balance to false, just like right here. And if it's not empty, then we're gonna pop the top value off of the stack, just like in the pseudocode. And then we're gonna check to see if that popped value equals the closed bracket that we found. And if it doesn't, then balance is going to equal false, and then the while loop is going to quit on its next iteration. And then after the loop has finished, we're going to return balanced and stack.empty. And so this means that we're going to check to see if the stack is empty. And if it's not empty, then it's going to return false, or if balanced is already set to false, then it's going to return false. But if both are true, it's going to return true.